It's time to take a ride on the Steelers Afternoon Drive with our co-hosts, Alan Saunders and Zachary Smith.
Welcome into another Steelers Afternoon Drive. I'm Zachary Smith. That is Alan Saunders. And Alan, we are continuing our trend with having some awesome guests on here to discuss the Steelers draft picks. I'll let you introduce the people to our guest today, and we'll dive into the discussion.
Yeah, welcome to the show. James Crepea from the Oregonian, which is a great newspaper name, by the way. I think that is one of the better ones out there.
I mentioned it yesterday. Yep, big fan.
Covers the Oregon Ducks, and obviously Steelers first round pick Derrick Harmon. James, thanks for joining us. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me on, guys.
You got tough to follow here. We've had a solid week. We had Spencer Holbrook, who covers Ohio State for 11 Warriors on yesterday, and then Tom Cackert from I think is that Iowa Hawkeye Report talking about. So it's been an all Big Ten draft for the.
I was going to say a Big Ten rivalry. You got them on the beat reporters too. Yeah,
they got 7 draft picks, 6 of them from Big Ten schools. Although it's still hard wrapping my head around calling Oregon and Washington Big Tens. I don't know. I'm still that's going to take a while. That's going to take a while. James, what was your first impression of the fit when you saw the ticker run by on Thursday night that Derrick Harmon's going to the Pittsburgh Steelers?
Well, to me, I mean, I thought it was a natural fit, and considering that I think everybody with a pulse who had a mock draft projected this, that it was the least surprising possible outcome and destination for Derrick specifically. I figured that, speaking for my own self, I knew my evening was going to be picking up in the second half of the first round, one way or the other, for both Derrick and Josh Connolly, and they both did go in the second half of the first round. But given, again, where all the I don't go by mocks, but those who are informed in the mock world, yes, virtually everybody had Harmon going to Pittsburgh. Combined with, for both of the guys, it was where they took top 30 visits and had formal meetings. And for Harmon, it was one of the few teams where that was the case. And I realized there was also other reasons why some of that happened. And for Connolly, he ended up going to Washington, and it was one of 2 teams that he had a formal meeting with at the Combine and then followed up with a top 30 visit. So sometimes it's easy to project like that, as we know. Sometimes it's very cryptic, and you find out these teams hardly had talked to the player at all. But be that as it may, I was not the least bit surprised, specifically for Derrick, that this was the destination, as had been outlined by many of the draftnik over the prior couple of months. It just seemed like a natural fit.
One of the things I'm really curious about is how he developed over his senior season. Obviously was a good player at Michigan State, but I don't think he's someone that before we got to Oregon was being talked about like he was going to be a first-round pick. What do you feel like he was able to improve on, what Oregon was able to unlock? Maybe the what and the why are different in terms of why he got so much better in his, I guess it was a redshirt junior year, senior year, I don't know, whichever you want to call it.
Redshirt junior, yeah. So kind of a confluence of a lot of things. And first you have to add the context also that Harmon was one of those guys who right around this time of year, last year, in this spring transfer window, spring free agency in the college circles. Yes, he did go in the winter, but he ultimately chose to return to Michigan State, went through spring practice there, and then went in again. So his time at Oregon really was quite finite. He didn't show up until later on in the summer. And, you show up with a purpose. And clearly it worked, obviously, very mutually beneficial all around. But he had nearly come to Oregon before in the winter, stayed, came, ultimately in the summer. Well, it's to be exactly what he was. It was to be a highly productive, effective guy in the middle who would just be wreaking havoc on a defense that had aspirations to be a championship caliber defense and a championship caliber team, and to put the players across the board who were in position to do so. Now, they also had 2 other interior defensive linemen drafted as well. I think knowing that and seeing that, combined with other factors, again, obviously Derrick had going on in his life as well. But in terms of what did they unlock, and how is he better put in several positions? One, by opportunity of having a Jamari Caldwell right next to you, and he gets drafted in the 3rd round, which not too many true nose tackles are. And that's not, and if you heard what the Chargers had to say about him, not one, the only way they look at him. What he had done at Houston was more pass rush. Here he was more of a two-gap run-stopping nose. Okay, and if you heard also what the Chargers said, they were also raving about Derrick because they were looking so much at Jamari. They were going like, yeah, that other guy's pretty good too. Yeah, he's pretty excellent. And yeah, by the way, Jordan Birch, who led the Big Ten in sacks on a per-game basis. He missed a few games, but on a per-game basis. Yeah, that was Oregon's starting defensive line. Having them all together, each of them having good years, each of them getting drafted this year. What gets unlocked when you put all of them together, that helps. That starts. Oh, yeah, and on the other bookend was the Big Ten's actual leader in sacks, who just wasn't draft eligible. So, yeah, that, again, all helps lead to a lot of production and a lot of star power. But ultimately what gets out of them also is you have great position coach and Tony Tuioti, who not too many defensive line coaches in college football are going to be able to say over the last several drafts that they sent this many guys to the league. And there are other ones, and there are other ones who have accomplished and have long resumes and have long lists of players who have made the league as well. Well, he's one over the last couple of years of the draft, would be right on among them. And he sent several guys to the league last year. Some were UDFAs, some were drafted, whatever the case was. Did it in Nebraska as well.
Ty Robinson this year.
Yeah, so bottom line, like, that's part of it. You put all those guys together with a good position coach, obviously with what Tosh Lupoy does for this defense along with Dan Lanning. And, yeah, you can take a 6'5", 300-plus pound, 2I/3, at times maybe even 4I in a pinch, defensive tackle. And, yeah, you can make him into a career year kind of player who can go from a draftable player to a first-round player in a hurry.
You might have mentioned some of this within that answer. Maybe it is more about like the coaching staff and stuff like that. But like when I used to think about Oregon growing up, obviously like the Mariotas of the world, the Justin Herberts, it was always about the offensive side of the ball. I feel like as you just mentioned within the past few draft classes, we're seeing more of the defensive side, more defensive players come out from Oregon into the NFL draft and be successful. Why do you think that transition has happened where they are getting more defensive players into the NFL draft?
Well, again, it goes back so much. Where to your point, when Oregon comes up in conversation, it gets referenced, especially for those in the Eastern time zone, because wind the clock back. It was the Chip Kelly offense, and it was the blur.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And for a certain generation, all you knew of was on the ticker. They were scoring every 2 seconds, and they were winning games by some video game score. It's 20 years ago, but that's what a lot of people still remember. Mainly because you couldn't watch the games at the time. And then, the Pac-12 network existed and you still couldn't watch the games. So all you knew and all you ever heard of was offense. And then when they made it to the big stage and actually played somebody good in the postseason, you also only heard about offense because they didn't have any defensive players. Or they had 2 or 3, like an Armstead and Buckner and those guys, and that started to change it a little bit. But, 2 or 3. They didn't have a full arsenal, and their line play, both offensively and defensively, really lacked. So when they went up against the powers of the Big Ten or the SEC or whatever it was, they usually got waxed because they didn't have the bodies. Well, it started to change. It's first under Cristobal, and he set the stage for the offensive line play. Then he began to do it a little bit defensively. Obviously, Kayvon Thibodeau was a huge part of that. But they couldn't quite totally turn the corner by way of across the board on defense. He didn't just have, Thibodeau was a front 7 guy. Troy Dye was a linebacker. He inherited. They also had a loaded secondary in 2019 when they won the Rose Bowl with Herbert. They had those guys, but then continuing it and filling the cupboard and restocking it, that got a little bit harder. Lanning came in. They totally cleared house now to the point where it's 100% his guys, no carryovers at all anymore. But even in this past draft class, they had to backfill with guys out of the portal, Harmon being one of them, because they needed to fill, particularly on the line of scrimmage, defensively. That was an area of weakness. That was. But they have begun to backfill it, and now to the point where, they added one this offseason, they added one. But now it's all the guys that Lanning and his staff and those guys have brought in over the last 3 cycles. Now they're starting to age up into those areas where this fan base is very excited about the future of their homegrown players, but they're equally as excited about the fact that, yes, they were able to take in transfers, Harmon being the latest, go back to Christian Gonzalez a couple of years ago, and have first round, Bo Nix, first-round players, several of whom, to your point, whether it was Harmon, Nick specifically, even Gonzalez to a point, who were not necessarily thought of as first-round players before they got here, and in 1 year, or 2 years in Nick's case, became that way.
Mm-hmm.
Dan Lanning, I think, has done a fantastic job with that defense. Got his coaching started in Pittsburgh, was a GA at the University of Pittsburgh. The story is he drove from Missouri to Pittsburgh without a job and just basically showed up and demanded one from Todd Graham, who was the head coach at Pitt then.
Yep.
So you could, I don't know if he has any fond memories of Pittsburgh or not, but you could ask him about that someday.
He's got a couple. He's got a couple. When Oregon was there for the NCAA tournament last year, I actually was asking him if I should stop by his old apartment just for remit.
There you go.
Should I be taking pictures? But yes, he definitely still has a couple for sure.
That's cool. So ESPN Seth Walder put something out yesterday where he's got this model that tries to project how many sacks defensive players are going to have over the first 3 years of their rookie contract. And he had Derrick Harmon as the number 1 defensive tackle in this class, projected for 10 sacks over his first 3 years. Now that model is, just based on their college game, not about like the situation they're going into in the pros. I think Harmon's going into a pretty good one. The Steelers are going to walk into a starting role at 3 tech in their in their sub package, or at least a big timeshare at 3 tech and a starting role at 5 tech in their 3-4 defense. What do you make of 10 sacks over 3 years? You think that's too high, too low, or you think they got that one pretty right?
As I say, you guys are going to have to tell me now. I mean, the game keeps evolving for one, and two, like, are we at an 18-game schedule yet in 3 years?
That's a good. Hey, I
would, for one, and I don't know
probably,
the divisional rotation and every opposing offensive line that they'd be facing, 2 years from now. I thought, shoot, at this point, first round interior defensive linemen, or especially edge rushers, if they don't get 10 sacks in a season, by the end of year 3, we're asking whether or not they should exercise their 5th-year option. I know it's different for, like you say, for a 3 or a 5, 2i, whatever the case is. I understand, but
I was a little.
It makes for good cannon fodder by way of off-season talk. Like I said, I'd love to know more about that analysis and projection, because I like I say, I can't even begin to wrap my head around necessarily how you project that over a 17-game schedule over 3 years. Like I say, a rotation of which has not even been devised and concocted. Like that's a tough one to swing for. But hey, if it's the most, I think, let's put it this way: I put more on the most than the 10 or 10.5 or 12 or whatever it would be. If it's the most. Mm-hmm. I could see that, especially if, and I'm hypothesizing here, give me some rope, if they're projecting a movement with Hayward, 2 years from now or something, to where Harmon has a bigger role into what the future of the position starts to look like. But like I said, I'd be very curious to delve further into whatever modeling is done. But if it's more than anybody else in the class, you can't fault it.
James, I have one last question, at least on my side here, before we get you out of here, regarding Derrick Harmon. And that's, I want to know about the person. We've heard a lot of accounts in terms of like the type of person that the Steelers could be getting, but like a first person account would be great. Something about Derrick Harmon that maybe we don't know, just what he's like as a person and why people speak so glowingly about him.
Well, you got a little bit of context of it, obviously, over the last week or so, with what was obviously a really terrible situation for him and his family. And because he'd only spent, as I say, really, all told, really about 6 months, here, it's not as though we have loads and loads of anecdotes and the like. What you did pick up on, though, was the manner in which he went about his business was really respected, not just on the field and the plays. And those obvious, that goes without saying. I mean, outright stealing a football away in the regular season matchup with Ohio State, just outright ripping it away from the running back for a fumble that then flips the script and they get an offensive score right back in a key moment of that game. But those kind of instances stand out. I'm talking about how he went about his business on a day-to-day basis, where, again, he came out here for a purpose. Came out here to do exactly what he did, and he did it. And did it in being away from home, away from the Detroit area, where obviously he wasn't that far at Michigan State before. Chose to do that with the situation health-wise with his mother at the time, though not as severe as it ultimately obviously became later on. But nevertheless, those are things that he did. And he had his purpose, he had his why, he had the reason why he was here to do that, to put himself in that position, and etc. And the way that he handled himself and conducted himself was, again, respected and revered by teammates and coaches in the short time that he was here. That was, and they picked up on that and respected that enormously. Then he backs it up with his play, and it just becomes a self-fulfilling cycle. And then as I put out on draft night, because obviously some of the various clips from ESPN and I want to say Big Ten Network and whoever else put out a little bit of the backstory of him and his mom. That one of the things that came up before the Rose Bowl was somebody was going around asking all the players for both teams, hey, what was your best NIL purchase? And what he had said at the time was a wheelchair accessible van for his mother.
Mm-hmm.
So like I say, when you talk about the importance of family and those things, and everybody could say these things, but how does it truly materialize? How does it truly show itself? These are the things he was willing to do over this past year to put himself in that position and to change his own life and his family's lives in the name of a greater cause and a greater reason other than just football. And again, obviously, happy for him and his family that he was able to experience that and fulfill that. And at the same time, obviously, like many people have expressed over the last week, really feel for them. And what is a tragic situation simultaneously is awful. But what was he like as a person? He was a guy who, by his own admission, he's not going to be a verbal, vocal, rah-rah, speech by way kind of leader. It's that kind of classical lead by example type. But he just went about things in a serious way because this was the purpose. Not to say that if he needed another year of college, it wouldn't have been a failure. But he came out here for the purpose of, I'm doing this for 1 year to put myself in the position to be that guy. There was not a 2-year plan here.
Yeah.
And again, that's not to say if there was or something happened that it wouldn't have worked. No, but there was a plan to join a championship caliber team and try and do some damage. By the way. And you could talk about mercenaries in college football and all that nowadays and everything else. This is somebody who also cared a whole lot about winning on this team in a short time. It wasn't just about, ultimately putting himself in a great position. It was about the team and the like. Another one, last thing for it, was the shoulder injury that came up. Hey, we don't have the same level of access to practice and everything like you do in the NFL. And forget about locker rooms. That's you gotta be kidding. But there are still things that we may see and pick up on when we are there, or whatever little we do get. He was never a guy. You never saw him going around. And I'm not saying, I don't know exactly when the injury happened, didn't happen. Not the point. To say there are guys sometimes, there's an ankle, there's a knee, they're in braces, they're in walking boots, they're in slings, and then they still play the next Saturday. But all right, they're dealing with something. Never got a hint of that. So I'm not saying when an injury happened, it didn't happen, or whatever. I'm saying there are things of how he went about it, and clearly was dealing with something at some point later on that we were largely unaware of in terms of at least severity of it as it came up during the draft. So again, the guy was just serious about his business. Came out here with a goal and an ambition and a drive, and delivered that on a daily basis for the 6+ months he was here. And like I say, fulfilled it.
There we go. Good stuff. I'm excited. Enjoyed this conversation. Alan, got anything else?
I think that's it.
All right, James, we appreciate you joining us. On your way out, if you could, tell the people where they could find you, get more of your work.
Absolutely. Well, you can follow me on Twitter or X or whatever we're calling it these days. Just at my name, Crepea, Crepea. And check out all the work accordingly at OregonLive.com/Ducks. And that would be for any and all coverage of both for Derrick and the draft. And we have a great backstory by my colleague on Derrick, a little bit more from earlier in the season. You can check out there as well. But yes, if you happen to be looking for more on landing the defense, the defensive line coach, a little bit more context, we'll have plenty of that there as well.
There we go. I'm super intrigued. I will definitely be keeping up to date because with the Steelers trend here in the Big Ten, you never know. Somebody in 2026 might be on that Oregon Ducks roster right now. So we'll see. But appreciate you for joining us, James. We'll have to do this again.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, James.
James Crepea joining us. Great conversation, Alan. We killed it this week. We killed it this week.
I might just take Friday off. I feel like I've done enough. I feel like we had a really good week.
Yeah, we did. You know what's funny is you sent me a question from our guy Tevin Carter here for post conversation with James to answer, and it's funny because you have a question from Tevin. I also have a question from Tevin in my Twitter DMs, and they're about to do Ohio State picks.
Tevin's been
So
doing the
he
most,
asked you about
and I'm
Howard.
here for it.
Asked you about Howard and sent me something about Jack Sawyer. It was more so a question to like touch on, I guess, because he has a little bit higher of a thought in terms of the Jack Sawyer pick, but we can get to that when we get to that in a second. I do have a shout out that I have to give Alan Brooke, who is a long time, I think probably like since we started doing this podcast. Steelers Afternoon Drive. She sent me something. I mentioned somebody wanted to send me something for the wall space that I still have open back there. These are pretty sweet. So these are photos of her terrible towels. She has like a bunch of different terrible towels that she like has a professional camera, it looks like as well, set up on the beach.
Oh, that's sweet.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
So these are going up on the wall. I'm not gonna do it live on here, but they'll definitely be up there. Maybe tomorrow, definitely Monday.
All right.
See, I'm a busy man. But shout out to Brooke. Appreciate you.
All
right, anyways. Back to Tevin here. So this was the one to you, Alan. He said, "What's up? What's up, man? Question for you. What keeps Will Howard from being a top 12 quarterback? This isn't me advocating or campaigning that he actually is that. Obviously, he doesn't possess the physical traits of a Lamar, Allen, or Mahomes, etc. But he's pretty close in ability measurements to a Burrow, Dak. Neither have the strongest arm or the fastest. So is it something about his mental capability? Just want your expert opinion. Alan.
That's right. This is the question, right? I mean, look, I don't know. Mental capability isn't really the right word for it. I just want to call it like quarterbacking, right? Like there's this combination of skills that you have to be good at being a quarterback that comes with anticipation, reading defenses, going through progressions, being able to feel pressure without having to look at pressure, like spatial awareness, being able to develop a connection with a receiver so that you know what they're going to do and how they're going to react to a situation without having to look at them. So much of quarterback looks easy on tape, but is really hard in real life because things are happening really fast. And what separates good quarterbacks from bad quarterbacks way more often than physical ability is their ability to process, make decisions, and go through those steps quickly, more quickly than the defense can throw different things at them. When we talk during the season a lot, there will be quarterbacks where I will say, you don't want to blitz this guy. Well, you don't want to blitz this guy because he's good at identifying the blitz, having the knowledge of how his receivers are going to adjust their routes in his head without having to take the time to look at it, just knows, I feel the blitz coming from this side. This guy's going to do this. Ball needs to go there. And then there it is. And that being good at that does not show up on any test. You can't, you can't quantify it, but it's what makes Tom Brady, Tom Brady. It's what makes Joe Burrow, Joe Burrow. And at a lower level, and what makes guys with average looking skill sets like, I don't know, Baker Mayfield be able to be good NFL quarterbacks. And it's not having that is what happens when you see guys where it's like, man, this guy has a huge arm and great legs and can make every throw. Why can't he figure it out at the NFL level? That's really the thing. And there's not, we can evaluate how they've done in those areas on tape in college. You can evaluate the personality of the person to see if it looks like he might have the makeup to be able to improve. But at the end of the day, you're just making a projection based on what he's done and how likely you think he is to get a lot better at it going forward. And that's a big difference between a guy like Will Howard and a guy like Joe Burrow, is that Burrow has shown and did show in college the ability to throw with anticipation at a really high level, the ability to feel the rush without having to see the rush, and things like that. And so, I'm not saying Ryan Howard can't continue to improve and continue to get better. Will Howard, Ryan's his brother. Why did I say Ryan? Ryan Howard is also the first baseman for the Philadelphia Phillies, right?
I was just saying, I didn't even know he had a brother named Ryan because I was thinking Ryan Howard. I was thinking brother, character from The Office.
Plays offensive line at Kansas State.
Okay.
And so I think Will Howard can can certainly be. There's nothing stopping him physically from being that. But when you look at where he was in college and the growth that he has to make in that area to get to that top half of the league in quarterbacks, I think that's what makes it. That's why it's a 6th round pick, right? That's what makes it like a less than 50-50 proposition.
Yeah, I mean, very early in your answer there, you said the thing that I immediately thought of was anticipation. I think he's very good at seeing guy open, throwing ball to open guy, but can he see them before they're open? Can he get the ball to where it needs to be before that receiver's turning, before he sees that and throw it? I mean, that's the thing about Burrow is I don't have him as the number 1 quarterback in the NFL. I think he is very high up on that list, but I think better than anybody else in terms of pre-snap seeing things. I think he's the best pre-snap quarterback in the NFL.
Joe Burrow is the best quarterback before he starts his throwing motion in the NFL.
Yeah.
Everything that leads up to him deciding to, and when he's about to throw the ball, he's the best in the NFL at it.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think Will Howard should have been selected before the 6th round.
Yeah, I think it was like I thought early 4th round. Like I was on the fence as to whether he'd be there. I actually decided that I didn't think he would be there for the Steelers at 1, 2, 3 in the 4th round. So yeah, I mean, I think he was underdrafted, but even in a 4th round situation, I'm not expecting that player to become a top half of the league starter. And that's why.
I will say from a physical standpoint, like, yeah, there's certainly nothing that he possesses that will hold him back in that way from being.
He doesn't have. Well, and the other part of it is that there are guys that have like physical tools that allow them to not need to be that good at that stuff.
Sure.
Like Lamar Jackson is still not good at all of those things. He's gotten a lot better, but he's still not that good at all of those things. But he also can run like the wind, and so that reduces the amount of work his arm and his brain have to do pretty significantly.
Yeah, absolutely. And then to me, Tevin, on our obviously recap and to talk selection went through, and Jack Sawyer was the one that kind of was scratching our head a bit, and we agree with that action. But Tevin's draft recap, I agree with the overall feeling on the draft, but in this caps, I think I'm a little more in favor of the Sawyer pick. You debate the value for that could have been a draft with a free agent, but even though Watt and Highsmith are dudes, neither are necessarily big, and Herbig is smaller than them. So I like the idea of Herbig being the pass down rotation, Sawyer being the kind of do it all. It's why I think the Bud Dupree body type is the best edge build for that defense.
Well, they don't think it is because their other 3 edge rushers are tiny. They have the 3s, probably like 1 through 3, the smallest 3 edge rushers in the NFL, right?
Yeah, probably up there.
Wow.
So, but I can understand where this notion is coming from, though, where that's exactly the reason. Like, you're getting a different body type in there. So when you are pulling Highsmith or Watt off the field, you have, your choice. Which one you're going to? Do you want the big body Sawyer? Do you want the, with more in his bag, it tricks in terms of pass rusher, and Nick Herbig, who's probably more of a specialist way. I'll give him credit for, holding up better than I expected him to against the run, but it's not like that's not his calling card, certainly. Nick Herbig's run defense in the edge. So I'm interested to see what that looks like. And we touched on this earlier in the week, but the one thing I will say is if this is their way to maybe get more out of less, meaning the higher quality snaps because of a reduction of snaps from Highsmith and TJ, if that's going to be the case, then I can see the vision. But if they're still going to be playing, 85-90% of the snaps, I have a hard time seeing the return on investment, at least within the first couple of years of Jack Sawyer's rookie contract.
Yeah, I do think it's essential that if you're going to have 3 guys that small, the 4th one has to be a bigger guy. And like that's clear.
Sure.
So, I think that makes a lot of sense. As I'm totally on board with you about value of the pick and whether it's going to show up or not.
Yeah. So we'll see. I hate the pick. I think it's fine value. Jack Sawyer be a little bit better. I didn't know that he was going to be around this pick. It's just, if the board was looking at receiver and slot for me in that spot, that's probably the direction I would have gone. But Alan, anything else?
We got a lot of comments piling up, so that's good. We got a Friday show coming up. We can fill those in. We're gonna keep the guests coming though. Seems like people like them. So
yeah, well, that's good. I'm glad. All right. Well, until then, Alan, tell people they find you.
A Saunders _PGH on X, Instagram, TikTok, and Blue Sky. PGH Steelers Now sites account. SteelersNow.com. Go there, read the word so I can get paid. Sign up for SN Plus. Like we just had somebody. I just put them in the old ticker there. So you check it out as it's going by. We just had a new edition, which is always good.
Is that Reiner?
Reiner, I would assume.
Reiner.
Yeah. I think Reiner. Whatever. Yeah. Sign up for SN Plus. You get an ad-free experience, and we're gonna do another subs only live stream. Might try to do one every month. So stay tuned for that. And Subon will do that this month, maybe after rookie camp next weekend. And then like, subscribe, and hit that bell for notifications here on the YouTube platform. That's free, helps us out a ton. And this one's going to be very difficult, Smitty. This might be the most difficult one possible. We are at.
I want to hear that before.
We are at 15,632. Now I have the significant advantage of the fact that I wrote an article for SteelersNow.com about all of the guys who wore 32 before Franco Harris, right when they were about to retire his number. Sometime after they announced that they were going to retire his number, but before sadly he wasn't able to be there for it. But now I have to pick which of the guys I want to name, and I can't remember which one is which story. Some of these guys have great stories too. I'm going to go with Tom Brown. Tom Brown is my pick here. Tom Brown is from Butler. He played one season with the Steelers in 1942 as an end. He played 9 games. End is basically a tight end now. Caught 4 passes for 69 yards and scored a touchdown on a lateral. He played college football at William & Mary, dropped out of school to go home and work in a mill in Butler, and asked to try out for the Steelers after reading they were short on bodies for training camp. And that's how he made the team in 1942. So Tom Brown, that's the one I'm going with for my 32. If you haven't read my article, you have no clue, because none of these guys, there have been I think 6 or 7 players that have ever worn 32 for the Pittsburgh Steelers, and none, obviously, since Franco started in 1972.
He ended what, 80s, early 80s?
80.
He would have been until
last year, I think.
Oh my God. Yeah. So I'm gonna. Oh, okay.
No,
you know what?
83.
I'm gonna. Okay. Just a quick search of names here that have worn the number 32. I'm gonna go with Dick Dolly, just because when in doubt, pick the funniest name. So that's
Dick Dolly didn't make my article, so I don't know if that's correct. I don't know.
Well, not 1940. It was apparently the year before Tom Brown in 42.
Brown
also,
was 42. Yes. So I think you're getting some bad info here about Dick Dolly. I don't know.
Oh yeah, so it says Dick Dolly was 41.
Oh, okay.
41.
All right. I don't know.
Only 41.
I did some research, and it's possible that they wore it but did not wear it in a game. That's possible too. I don't know.
Okay. Oh. Either way, that's tough. Hopefully we don't land on that one ever again in our subscriber count here. But that also shows the growth of this channel, the fact that we're already up to 32 after, that's like, 18 within the last 24 hours. So, hey, let's keep going at that rate. Like, subscribe, hit that notification bell so we can keep climbing here. If you're listening somewhere else, Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast from, be sure to leave us a 5-star review and subscribe over there. Just search Steelers Afternoon Drive. Do the same thing on TikTok, and then you'll find me everywhere at Zachary Smith, PGH. For Alan Saunders and myself, for jumping in and take another ride on the Steelers Afternoon Drive.